Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May all be happy. May all be free from diseases. May all see only goodness everywhere. May no one be subject to misery. May there be peace, peace and peace everywhere by God's grace. So now that I have chanted this ancient prayer, it is my duty to tell you what the subject of my talk this morning is. The subject of my talk is Sri Ramakrishna, Master of Disguise. Yes. Whether everybody knows it or not, Sri Ramakrishna was a divine incarnation. He is the divine incarnation for this age. Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Sharada Devi. These two are divine incarnations for this age. Only some saints of 19th century, some of them recognize Sri Ramakrishna to be a divine incarnation. But ordinary people, they would not know what a divine incarnation was, and they could not even recognize a saint. Because by seeing the external appearance, you cannot know who is a saint. That great saint of Vrindavan, Ramdas Kathia Baba, in the 19th century, he said that a saint is like an elephant. People can see the tusks of the elephant, but the elephants have some inner teeth with which the elephants chew their food and digest. So those inner teeth are not seen by people. Only the tusks are seen. So by seeing the external appearance of a divine incarnation or a saint, you cannot know a saint. Only another saint with deep insight will be recognized as saint. That's how it is. Sri Krishna is recognized to be a divine incarnation. And it is he who said to Prince Arjuna, whenever there is any decline in spirituality, God bodies himself forth, mostly as a human being, to revive spirituality in the world. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyam paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha duskritam. That's why I come, to revive spirituality and to destroy obstacles to spirituality. How? By the divine incarnation's life and teachings. And even people, by seeing a divine incarnation, may not recognize that divine incarnation to be a divine incarnation. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, it was based on a diary which was kept by one young person who was in his late 20s, but he was extremely brilliant, and that's why he was made the principal of a high school in British India. He was lucky to have come and seen Sri Ramakrishna, and then became very close to him. It is he who had photographic memory. Whatever he would hear, that would be in his memory. In those days there were no tape recorders, but there were a few very rare people who had photographic memory. So Mahendranath Gupta was that person who had photographic memory. He used to come to Sri Ramakrishna and he had his conversation, and when he would return at home in the evening, he would write that conversation down in his diary. It would be his diary contained these precious sayings of Sri Ramakrishna. Eventually, after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, the other devotees of Sri Ramakrishna came to know about the diary of Mahendranath Gupta. That's why they pressured him to publish that in the form of a book. He was reluctant, but they said, no, you have to do it for our sake. That's why that book, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, became available to everybody. And Sri Sarada Devi, the spiritual consort and divine incarnation, Sarada Devi, consort of Sri Ramakrishna, when she heard part of that book which was read out to her, she said, yes, it is exactly as he used to talk. This is a most reliable book. In that book, we find Sri Ramakrishna talking to Mahendranath Gupta. And Mahendranath Gupta had been coming to Sri Ramakrishna for many days, and Sri Ramakrishna helped him to develop in spirituality. That's why Sri Ramakrishna one day asked Mahendranath Gupta, do you find me like anyone else? Then Mahendranath Gupta said, no sir, you can't be compared to anyone else. You are incomparable. Then Sri Ramakrishna said, I look like a Paramhansa. Well, one of Sri Ramakrishna's teachers, spiritual teachers, he practiced many religions, Christianity, Islam, and different and the practices of different sects of Hinduism. So one of his gurus was a Jnana Yogi. His name was and he recognized Sri Ramakrishna to be a divine incarnation, but he gave sannyas to Sri Ramakrishna. And so when he got sannyas, what his original sannyas name was there, I do not know. But all that his teacher, he belonged to the sannyasis which are introduced by Shankaracharya, the great saint. And then so when he got a sannyas name, and he gave Sri Ramakrishna sannyas. So I believe that Sri Ramakrishna also got a sannyas name, that name we do not know. But all sannyasis of the Shankara order, Shankaracharya order, they have they belong to the Puri group, and also some of them Puri, Giri and all these titles were given by Shankaracharya. So Sri Ramakrishna was Puri because his teacher was Tota Puri, and then his last name must have been Paramahansa. So I also belong to that same order, having been a follower of Sri Ramakrishna. So my full name is Swami Bhaskarananda Puri and then Paramahansa. That is my full name. Had I been in a gathering of sannyasis in India, such as it used to be during the fair called Kumbh Mela, sannyasis would come. Many sannyasis would come and take a holy bath in the river Ganga. So at that time they would introduce one another by their full sannyasa name. So Sri Ramakrishna was a Paramahansa. So he asked Mahendranath Gupta, do I look like any Paramahansa? Of course, Mahendranath Gupta did not know who a Paramahansa was. But said, sir, you are unrecognizable. You cannot be compared to anyone else. Then Sri Ramakrishna said to him, have you heard of a tree which is called in Bengali Ochine tree? Because they are speaking in Bengali. There is a tree called Ochine tree. Ochine, what is Ochine? Ochine means which cannot be recognized. There is a tree, but even by seeing the tree you cannot recognize what tree it is. So Sri Ramakrishna said, he was the one Ochine tree. You could see him but you could not recognize him. As a divine incarnation. That's what he said. So Sri Ramakrishna is that Ochine tree. You can see him but you won't be able to know who he really is unless he reveals himself to you. Why divine incarnations are not recognizable? Because they use disguises, the masters of disguise. Sri Ramachandra was a divine incarnation, but that he was a divine incarnation, only a few saintly persons could know. But all others thought he was a prince, he was the son of King Dasharatha. He was a human being, that's all. Only a few sages recognized him. So also with Krishna, Sri Krishna. How many could recognize him as a divine incarnation? In the Bhagavad Gita, which is part of that great epic, the Mahabharata, Sri Krishna revealed to Prince Arjuna that he was not an ordinary person. He was a divine incarnation. But could Arjuna understand it? No, not really. All right. Some scholars of Hinduism, they know the signs and symptoms of a divine incarnation as they have been mentioned in the scriptures. So, Sri Ramakrishna put on the disguise of a human being, of course, and at that time he was at the request of his big brother and others. he had to start worshipping as a priest in the temple of the Holy Divine Mother Kali, in the temple complex of Dakshineshwar, founded by Rani Rasmani. And this temple complex is very large. There are many temples there. And the monks and nuns could come there and stay as guests. They had accommodation for them. And they would be given food also. Some of them would come and stay for a few days also. So one nun, she belonged to the Tantrika order, it looks like. She was called Bhairavi Brahmani. She came and stayed there, and she saw Sri Ramakrishna. And Bhairavi Brahmani was very well versed in the scriptures. So when she saw Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna, even though he tried to disguise himself, still he could not hide that he was a divine incarnation. Then Bhairavi Brahmani told Mathur, who was the supervisor of the temple complex, and he was the son-in-law of Rani Rasmani, who had founded that temple complex. So she said to Mathur that Sri Ramakrishna was a divine incarnation. He was not just a human being or a priest. Then Mathur also had come to know Sri Ramakrishna a little bit. Because once Sri Ramakrishna granted Mathur a vision. As Sri Ramakrishna was walking up and down, then Mathur was looking at him. And then Mathur saw that Sri Ramakrishna sometimes looked like the Divine Mother Kali, and another time it would look like the Lord Shiva. So such things he saw. So he had great regard for Sri Ramakrishna also. So he then arranged for a meeting of the scholars of the scriptures who were available at that time in Bengal. And those best scholars came. And they came to the temple complex. And there was a large covered courtyard in front of the temple of the Divine Mother Kali. They all sat there, and Sri Ramakrishna also had to sit there in front of them. And like a child, he sat there because one of his disguises was childlike simplicity also. And he sat there, and he had a small bag containing some spices which in Bengal people chew sometimes. So he had that, and he was chewing one spice or the other. And the scholars, they're called Pandits, they examined Sri Ramakrishna. And they were amazed to see that all the signs and symptoms of a divine incarnation which are given in the holy books, they are present in Sri Ramakrishna. So that's why they all unanimously declared Sri Ramakrishna to be a divine incarnation. What happened? Sri Ramakrishna didn't give any importance to that statement. Why should he give? Because he already knew that he was a divine incarnation. He did not become very elated and started jumping for joy. No. He sat there as the scholars were talking about, Pandits were talking about someone else. So it was Bhairavi Brahmani who recognized Sri Ramakrishna as a divine incarnation. But Mathur believed in that. So Sri Ramakrishna's human form was his first disguise. I think his human form, people would not know that he was a divine incarnation. Ordinary people would think that he was just an ordinary human being, a good person perhaps. And Sri Ramakrishna, once he used to talk to the Divine Mother because he could see divinity there, Divine Mother, in person actually. And he would behave that way. Sometimes he would put the flower which he was supposed to put at the feet of the Divine Mother Kali, he would put that on his head. And so he would behave strangely because his world was a different world. Ordinary people could not understand Sri Ramakrishna's behavior. Some of them thought that he was eccentric, but he was not. That eccentricity was also his disguise. And Sri Ramakrishna, as a divine incarnation, he came down to earth to help some spiritual souls. But they were not coming. So one day he went to the flat roof of one of the buildings in the temple complex. And those buildings are made of brick and the flat roofs have railings. People go there sometimes and walk on the roof or they sit down in summer and they can get some fresh air. And so Sri Ramakrishna went up to such a roof of the building which was in the temple complex. That was the office building actually, Rani Rasmani. And then there was no one else. Then he said to the Divine Mother, Mother, I have come to help people who want to have the experience of divinity. Why are they not coming? Then the Divine Mother said, don't worry, they will come. And then one by one those people started coming. For example, Narendra, who later became Vivekananda, and Premananda, and so many others, saints, they one after another they came. And there was one Bhavanath, he was a householder, but he came. It was his last incarnation, Bhavanath's. So he came to see Sri Ramakrishna and got spiritually benefited. So they started coming. And then Sri Ramakrishna said to the Divine Mother, Mother, I don't have any formal education, I cannot give lectures on anything. So give me one power. If I touch somebody, they will become spiritually enlightened. Please give me that boon. And that's what happened to Sri Ramakrishna. By his mere touch, he could give spiritual enlightenment to people. That's what he would not forbid people to come and touch his feet, because in India, salutation is done that way to a person who is considered a little holy or who is senior. So some people would come and touch his feet. And there was a Sri Ramakrishna also had told Sri Sarada Devi, who was his spiritual consort, he told that this time I have come like a king in disguise. and to help the subjects. So I put on disguise and go and try to help them. But when they'll recognize me as a divine incarnation, or they'll start doing that, then I have to go back to my palace. That is, I have to depart from this world. And the time came when some people started recognizing Sri Ramakrishna as a divine incarnation. That's why he decided to give up his mortal frame. And Sri Sarada, hearing that, said, "If you depart, then what shall I do?" He said, "No, what I have done is but little, you have to do much more," Sri Ramakrishna said to her. And then Sri Ramakrishna feigned to have some disease. And that disease appeared as some kind of, eventually it was discovered to be a throat cancer. But that was his own creation. He could have cured himself in 1 second. But no, he had to play that role. That was his disguise also. Then once one devotee named Durgacharan Nag, he was a homeopathic doctor. He was a devotee. He came to Sri Ramakrishna and he recognized Sri Ramakrishna to be a great saint. Not as a divine incarnation, but a great saint. And he said to Sri Ramakrishna, "Please allow me to touch you," because the Durgacharan Nag also had the ability to draw in diseases from people's body. He was not an ordinary person. He was also some sort of a saint. Then Sri Ramakrishna said, "No, no, no. You would not allow Durgacharan Nag to cure his throat cancer." Because and he would behave like a child sometimes. That childlike simplicity was his disguise also. And one Dr. Sarkar used to come to him, and Sri Ramakrishna wanted to help Dr. Sarkar to grow spiritually. But Dr. Sarkar came and thought that he was treating Sri Ramakrishna's illness. It is very interesting. And then Dr. Sarkar saw Sri Ramakrishna and saw that he was like a child. So he would try to advise him. Sri Ramakrishna had many advisors, because when he would behave like a child, people would come and advise him. So he would allow people to come and touch his feet. So Dr. Sarkar said to him, "Don't allow people to come and touch your feet." Because Dr. Sarkar thought that this would help development of false ego in Sri Ramakrishna, which is not good. So he wanted to be Sri Ramakrishna's advisor. He said, such salutation ruined Keshav Chandra Sen, who was a renowned leader of the Brahma Samaj, a society of Hinduism which believed only in God without form. So Dr. Sarkar would advise Sri Ramakrishna not to allow others to touch his feet and salute him. Once another leader of the Brahma Samaj, Vijaya Krishna Goswami, he was saintly. He used to live in East Bengal in Dhaka. Then he saw Sri Ramakrishna appear before him in Dhaka. Then he saw it as a vision only. No, then he touched Sri Ramakrishna and he could see that Sri Ramakrishna had appeared there in flesh and blood. He was overwhelmed. And after that, once he came to see Sri Ramakrishna in Dakshineshwar near Calcutta. And there he said, "I saw you in Dhaka." And then while saying that, his eyes welled up his eyes started shedding tears and all. Then Sri Ramakrishna said, that's all right, because he didn't want Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna did not want Vijay Krishna Goswami to talk about that experience in Dhaka. In spite of that, Vijay Krishna Goswami said that to Sri Ramakrishna, that I saw you there. Then Sri Ramakrishna would like to hide his personality, spiritual personality. He said, perhaps he saw someone else there. You know what I mean? But then Narendra, who was present there, he called Vijay Krishna Goswami outside and said, yes, I also have seen him in my study. He comes to my study and he teaches me. And appearing there in his body. So Narendra knew. There is Narendra later on became Vivekananda. So Narendra saw Sri Ramakrishna many times in his study. While Sri Ramakrishna was in Dakshineshwar Kali complex, Kali temple complex. So, and then a time came when the devotees thought that Sri Ramakrishna should, as he was ill, he should stay away. And they found a place for him in a place called Kashipur near Calcutta. And they rented a country house of a rich man, and Sri Ramakrishna was made to stay there. And Sri Ramakrishna went there. It was a very large house surrounded by a man-made lake and trees and all these things, you see. It was a beautiful place. And some of the young devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, they also would go there. There is enough room for them even to lie down and sleep there. So, and the Holy Mother, Sri Sarada Devi, we call her Holy Mother. Sri Sarada Devi stayed in a room on the main floor next to the staircase which would lead to Sri Ramakrishna's room upstairs. And then Sri Ramakrishna would pretend to be so ill that he could not even raise his head from his pillow. That was his external appearance. Only once in a while he would get up. And the devotees would go there and would try to give him some service. Then one night, while others were sleeping, she saw Sri Ramakrishna running down the stairs and going out of that house. She was surprised by seeing Sri Ramakrishna because others would see him lying down in bed, unable to even raise his head sometimes. Then he ran down. Then after a while he came in and ran up the staircase and went to his room. Then Sri Sarada Devi went to Sri Ramakrishna's room. Sri Ramakrishna smiled and said, so you saw me there, going there. He said, I went there because the boys, that means those young men who were there, they had hung a pitcher on the date tree to collect sweet date juice. That's what they do in India. But I saw a cobra on that tree. So I thought that might do harm to those boys. That's why I went and chased away that cobra from the tree. That's what Sri Ramakrishna did. He did all that in putting on the disguise of a sick person. And in Kashipur country house, he saw that Narendra was very eager to have some kind of high spiritual experience such as Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Then he one day he touched Narendra. And Narendra started losing his body consciousness. Then he experienced that state of communion with divinity. At that time he didn't have any body consciousness or anything, only God consciousness. But after that he became aware of this world. Gradually his mind came down to the awareness of this world, and then he said to his other disciples who were there, young men, he asked one of them, where is my body? Because he didn't have body consciousness at that. So that is, at that time he had Nirvikalpa Samadhi, it is called. At that time a person loses body consciousness and has only God consciousness. So he was eager to have such an experience, so Sri Ramakrishna granted him. But after that he said, no, you won't have this again. Narendra approached him and said, please give me that experience so that I can be immersed in that all the time. Then Sri Ramakrishna said, no, you have to do the Divine Mother's work. You have to do the Divine Mother's work. You cannot be in Samadhi. By the time you will have done the Divine Mother's work, it will be given to you again. And that's what happened actually. After the passing of Sri Ramakrishna, Narendra, at that time they started living together, those brother disciples, and they all became monks. And Narendra became Vivekananda. And then as Vivekananda, when he was traveling in South India, near the coast of Madras city, which is, then he saw a vision. He saw Sri Ramakrishna walking over the sea and going toward the west and beckoning Swami Vivekananda to go with him. And at that time, the first world's Parliament of Religion was going to be held in Chicago in America. And they all had heard of that. And delegates were invited. But Narendra was not invited because they didn't know about Narendra. Other representatives of other religions and sects of Hinduism and Islam and all, they all went there. And so Vivekananda, by that time Swami Vivekananda had one or two disciples who were kings of native states of India. At that time there were some native states of India during British rule. And the king of Ramnath became his disciple. The king of Khetri became his disciple. And king of Ramnath wanted Swami Vivekananda to go to America as the representatives of Hinduism. And then eventually the king of Khetri also helped him to pay his fare to go to America by ship. And his private secretary went to Sri Ramakrishna to Bombay, where went with Swami Vivekananda to Bombay, where Vivekananda boarded the ship to go to America. So all those things happened. And then in America, after Sri Ramakrishna would appear to Narendra many times and would tell him, because he was invited by a lecture bureau to give talks all over America. And he was also, by Sri Ramakrishna's grace, was able to become a delegate at the parliament, and his lectures impressed people so much that the one newspaper wrote about Vivekananda, he is an orator by divine right. Then a lecture bureau hired Vivekananda. Then he went to many different places, and Sri Ramakrishna would appear before him. Sometimes Vivekananda had to give 2 or 3 lectures every day, and Sri Ramakrishna would appear before him at night and would tell him what kind of teaching to give. So, after going all those activities, when Vivekananda was in the Thousand Island Park in America, then he sat under a tree and he got back his Nirvikalpa Samadhi, indicating that the Divine Mother's work, which Sri Ramakrishna said he would have to do, that had been done by him. So this is the story, Sri Ramakrishna. And so Sri Ramakrishna would use disguises, sometimes disguise of a child. That's why Mathur would allow him to sleep with him, when Mathur was sleeping with his wife, because he treated him as a child. And he behaved like a child also, childlike simplicity. So he would use that as a disguise. Sri Ramakrishna was a past master in disguise. His human form was his first disguise. He disguised himself. But at the same time, like that king who is in disguise, who helped his subjects. But when some subjects started recognizing him to be a king, he had to go back to his palace. So he also had to go back. He said, as I told you, he said to the Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi, I have to go back. And he went back, went to his divine identity. But he's still there as divinity to help the devotees everywhere. Just as in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna at the end told Arjuna, he had told Arjuna that he was a divine incarnation, but Arjuna could not understand all those things. But at the end he said to Arjuna, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam braja aham tvam sarva pape bho moksheshami mashuchaha. Arjuna, give up all religious practices, but only surrender unto me, and I liberate you from all sins and will give you spiritual enlightenment. That assurance Sri Krishna gave. And Sri Krishna and Ramakrishna, they are not different. They are one and the same. So he is also giving us that assurance. Let us surrender unto him and we will experience divinity. We will have spiritual enlightenment. Thank you all so much for being patient to listen to this talk. May Sri Ramakrishna bless us all.